Right, so this presentation, the main part of it is actually going to be run by Kevin, because we're going to lock the doors very shortly and you'll be kept in here for the next 3 hours to talk about the consultation on the new Level 3 Cyber Apprenticeship standard. But before that, I wanted to just provide a little bit of context, and my screen's gone blank, so I can't see my slides. Give a little bit of background as to where we've come from. So we're both directors of Qufaro, and how we've come to the point of actually deciding that there is a need for a new cybersecurity apprenticeship standard. And for those of you that don't currently have any apprentices in your workforce, a business case for why you should have apprentices in your workforce. Okay. So for many of you, this is actually wonderful news. Every business out there is going to be a digital business, which actually increases the number of risks, which requires more people in there, so it keeps all of you and all of us in work for many, many years to come. But it also creates a huge number of challenges. And this is focusing on the digital, but as well as the cyber skills issue. If you look at the bottom left from my side, bottom right for you, the number of staff that are currently in digital roles and cyber roles in the UK are going to be impacted by Brexit, whether we like it or not, one way or another. In fact, an awful lot of people have already left. And that's on top of the fact that there are already a huge number of vacancies across not only the UK, Europe and the world. Anybody here not suffering from staff shortages or skills shortages in cyber? One person not suffering. I'll have to have a chat with you later on. But if you look at the number of unfulfilled vacancies in cybersecurity at the moment, there is just no way of actually filling those, and that's despite the fact that so many organisations are actually trying to cross-skill and find new talent. If anybody works in the sort of West Country area, you'll find that actually there's a constant stream of people jumping from one company to another for 10%, 15% pay rises on a regular basis, and that is unsustainable. Yes, if you're a top-tier bank, you might be able to go away and recruit on very, very high salaries, but for most people, particularly SMEs, that is just not sustainable. And for many other organisations, so a representative here from the Local Government Association, they can't afford to pay those sort of salaries. So we need to take a different approach. And that's where Qufaro comes in. We were set up really to try and address the skills shortage and actually create qualifications for particularly younger people coming into the profession, but also help provide a career pathway for people into the profession. And in that context, about 3 years ago, we launched a qualification called an Extended Project Qualification, an EPQ, if anybody's familiar with sixth form studies. It's equivalent to half an A level, so it carries UCAS points, so it's an entry point into university for those students that want to take it up. It's a formally accredited qualification, so City and Guilds, who helped us develop the curriculum in the first place, and it's developed and to be delivered nationally online, so it's scalable. And we literally have students from Scotland down to Somerset. It's been running in a pilot phase for about 2 or 3 years now. We've had 250 students go through it. In fact, bumped into one of our former graduates here earlier on today. And we know this is well liked by universities. The way an EPQ works, it's about independent working, the way that they work in university. So the students get taught all the basics of cybersecurity. We have 10 modules and it covers everything from cryptography, pen testing, GDPR, cyber essentials, risk mitigation and the like. And that's content that's all been provided by lots of supporters, including people like the national crime agencies, big cyber companies and tech companies and independent consultants. They go through that knowledge in the first term, and in the second term they go away and do an independent research project of their own choice. As long as it's linked back to something they've learnt, they do a 5,000 word essay, they do a presentation, but they're actually measured on their whole learning journey, so how they've gone about actually researching, verifying the resources that they've used, how they're project managed. So it's about creating a rounded individual, but also in the way that they would end up working when they get to university. So that's been going for about 3 years, and we're just about to now start scaling up. We probably have about 300 to 500 odd students going through next year. We're finding that actually quite a few employers are interested in talking to us because actually this is a good source of recruits for you. So if you're looking for recruits in cybersecurity, please let us know. We can post those up into our Moodle forum and we can actually advertise for you to our students.
Can I just ask, when you say cyber, what do you actually mean?
Do you want to answer that one? We take actually a fairly, I'll answer it, I think. We take a very broad definition of cybersecurity, so it's not just the technology aspects of it. It's not things like just pen testing. We had a very good student, for example, 2 years ago, who said she didn't want to do cybersecurity as a profession. She wanted to do law. So her project was on the Computer Misuse Act and whether that's being enforced for good or not. So we cover everything from governance, policy, and ethics, as well as some of the technical stuff. So we.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, you can really do it. So the foundation for this was a project that was run a few years ago on National Occupational Standards for Information Security, and that produced a framework for cyber skills that went from level 3, from A level, up to level 7. And we've taken that model and used it as the basis for the education that we've put into the EPQ. And I spent a number of years working at the Open University. I've moved from employer to university to employer. I'm now involved deeply in the cyber industry, and it is necessary to give people a broad understanding, and the NOS was the only framework that provided that. What's happened since is that was largely based on an earlier version of the IISP skills framework, and that is now becoming the definitive source. So I've been working with Peter here from the Institute, and yes, you can do a good introduction to the breadth of cyber across all the disciplines in half an A level. See me later if you'd like to have the details.
Would you consider now using the cybersecurity body of knowledge, the cyber?
No. And I have...
So the question is, would we consider using CyberEPQ instead?
No. And I have a very good reason for CyberEPQ. CyberEPQ to me reads as something that's designed for university level and above.
Well, it's actually designed for curriculum at any level.
Yeah. And I've struggled to map it in a sensible way to vocational qualifications at level 3. So, yeah, I have a real issue with CyberEPQ at level 3.
Yeah. We'll take that offline
Yeah.
because there's a way.
But the real reason for talking about this is because when we started delivering this, we've identified that actually there is a lot of demand from school children who want to learn more about cybersecurity. And we have children as young as 14 that have been taking this as a qualification. We also have people in the world of work who want to use this as a way of career changing.
Have you got this into the UTCs?
Yes, we've been talking to the UTC Cyber Group. 15 of them come together, and they've been talking about putting several hundred students through this next year.
Brilliant.
So yes, we'll definitely do
Sorry,
it.
just a question at the end of what. Did I hear you say this is a half an A level? So if a student went to sixth form and picked 4 A levels, this could be one of them. Effectively, is that
Yeah, so they normally do this in the first year of sixth form. So
it's a 1 year thing, is it?
well, they can do it over up to 3 years if they want to, but no, most people take it in 1 year.
And it can feed into their university.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's UCAS points carrying standard university
so
application.
we're getting slightly distracted, but the way colleges tend to work is that they get to draw down funding from the DFE for up to 4 subjects. And what traditionally has happened in the past is that a lot of students end up doing 4 A levels in the first year, drop one of them in the second year because most universities are only interested in 3. So that effectively is, it's good for the colleges because they get to draw down the funding, but not so great for the students. By doing this, they do it in 1 year and they get the UCAS points as well to add to their. So that's where it's come from.
Out of interest, do you know if there's any alignment to the International Baccalaureate?
No, there isn't, not at the moment, not formally, but we are talking to DCMS and DFE about what might be happening in the future. So watch this space, we'll see what happens. Okay. Sorry, so yeah, we've been very fortunate. We've had some good sponsors. So Deloitte sponsored it for the first few years. It's all delivered on a Moodle by Hart Worcester College. All our students get access to immersive labs. So there's a bunch of partnerships we have behind this. We got approached a few years back, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, about actually using what we've been doing with the EPQ to actually help facilitate a level 4 apprenticeship. So these are the current apprenticeships that are out there. The ones in blue are the ones that are currently there. There are 2 at the moment at level 4, and those are coming together in the next review of cyber apprenticeship standards. We felt that there was a need for a feeder into level 4, and Kevin will cover some of the take-up at level 4. So we've been working to develop a new cybersecurity standard at level 3, and Kevin's going to talk a bit about that later in a few minutes' time, because that's the real meat of what we want to talk about to you as a stakeholder group today. Now here is the important thing. So who here takes on cyber apprentices? There's a few here. There are very good reasons as to why you should consider cyber apprentices. And it doesn't matter whether you're a micro business, a small business, or a large business, because the business case is actually phenomenally good. And this was, when I first saw this, I just thought, why wouldn't you do this? So I'll walk through this. If you are a big company, starting at the bottom, and you have a salary bill of 3 million more across your business, the government will automatically deduct 0.5% of that and put it into the apprenticeship levy. If you want to take on an apprentice, and that could be somebody new, or it could be somebody that's already in the business that you want to reskill, you get to draw that money back. If you don't use that money within 24 months, you lose it. So there's a good reason for using it. And for every £1 that you put in, you get a 10% top up. Okay? And if you take somebody within the 16 to 18 age group, you get an extra £1,000 as well on top of that. So if you're a big business, that money is being taken from you whether you like it or not. You might as well try and use that to build your own apprenticeship workforce. If you're a small company with more than 50 employees but a wage bill of 3 million or less than 3 million, you would end up paying 5%. Now for a level 4 apprentice, the full training cost over 2 years is £18,000. That means you would pay for that 2 years worth of training £900. That's when it starts getting interesting. And again, you can take existing workforce, or you can recruit new. And if you take on somebody under the age of 18, you get an extra £1,000. Of course, you still have to pay your normal salary costs, your national insurance costs, and all the rest of it. But it's still a phenomenally good value for money exercise. And if you're a very small company, less than 50 people, if you take on someone aged 16 to 18, you don't pay anything for the training at all. If they're over 19, you only pay the 5%, so you pay £900. And again, you get the usual incentives of £1,000 for recruiting somebody if aged 16 to 18. So who knew about this in this room? Few people. Anybody here feel there's a business case to be made for an apprenticeship? So if anybody's interested in learning more about this, come and have a chat with me. Our stand's out there, Qufaro, we can provide you some information on not only how this might work, but also what the career path through a level 4 apprenticeship would look like. But as I said, the real meat of today is about talking about the level 3 apprenticeship standard, which we've been working on. And at this point, I will hand over to Kevin.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. First is a bit of audience participation. Who has any involvement in employing somebody in cybersecurity, or employing or influencing somebody who employs somebody in cybersecurity?
Are you including information security in this?
Including information security in this. Okay, great. You're the people that I particularly want to talk to. I'm not excluding everybody else, but you have a very important part to play in the next section I'm going to talk about. Cybersecurity apprenticeships. While I was working at the Open University, I responded to the Richards Review of Apprenticeships on behalf of the university, which said apprenticeships basically don't work. And we needed to reform the whole apprenticeship model to make it employer friendly and to bring in standards that were actually relevant for our industries. Took a number of years, that was 2012. We're only just getting to volume in a lot of the standards. So most organisations use the previous apprentice frameworks really until a couple of years ago. So we're now into volume. And what there is at the moment, there's the first one out of the gate was cyber intrusion analyst at level 4. Level 4 in the vocational world is roughly equivalent to where you are at the beginning of university. Vocational, academic, very different approaches, very different standards, but that's roughly what we're talking about. And it very focused on SOC operations, SOC analyst, that type of area, network intrusion. The second one that came out was much more generalist, cybersecurity technician, technologist. which was Cyber Operations Manager, Cyber Security Specialist, Security Administrator. These were put together by large groups of employers with a sort of consensus about what's important. And there's also a degree level apprenticeship, cybersecurity technical professional, wrapping in a degree as part of an apprenticeship program. So these were the ones that came out over the last few years. But we have a problem. Just have a look at the numbers. Okay, this is meant to be the big program to bring new people into the cyber industry. Intrusion analyst, 16, 17, there were 10. Security technologist, 100. It's slowly going up, 236. But in comparison to some of the bigger standards, the more widely used standards, you think a lot of people looking at apprenticeships are people that are not going to university. They want a pathway into cyber that is relevant. So at the moment, the only option is infrastructure technician. So down here, yep, 17, 18, 2,896 starts. That's a decent standard. That's running pretty nicely across a number of providers. So cyber feels like it's got a problem. And that's really where we started the discussion at Qufaro, is actually, wouldn't it be nice to have a cyber standard that had thousands of people coming into the industry rather than a few hundred or tens? So that's what we decided to go and have a go at. There's also been a really good change in the way that apprenticeships have been developed. The initial approach at doing apprenticeships sort of laid out some quite fixed knowledge modules that you had to do, and then that sort of tied to some competencies, but it didn't directly relate to an employer hiring an apprentice. What matters is, what do you put on the job description? What are the duties that an apprentice is going to do when they come into the business? And the new style of apprenticeship is very much based on duties. What is the job? So if somebody comes in as a cyber technician, what's the job they're going to do? And that's the stage we've reached at the moment. This was at the sort of towards the end of the previous cycle of developing standards. Lots of things going on. So this is level 4, level 5, level 7 masters. And I was just looking at that section there. We should have cyber here. Why shouldn't people come into cyber at 16? There are plenty of things that people can come in and do as vocational roles at that age, just like they do with infrastructure, but we should also bring this in as a starting point to bring a lot of people into the industry. So, Qufaro pulled together a group of people back in November last year. We brought in IISP, BCS, large organisations, small organisations. We've got single employer organisations, right up to some of the biggest. To say, okay, we need a level 3 standard for an apprenticeship. Let's go write one. What you need to make that work really successfully is a knowledge framework. At which point, walk over this side of the room to Peter, happen to have a knowledge framework ready to go, and tie that with the ISP skills framework. Everything we need is in there. So we've developed the new standard, proposal for the new standard, based on the ISP frameworks, and our aim is to try and get an initial 400 apprentices into cybersecurity at level 3 in all sectors. So every industry needs people to come in and work in some form of cyber role. Let's address as many sectors as we can. So here's the initial profile. I'll just give you a second to read it. It's essentially based on first-line cyber security support. when part of the new process for apprenticeships is you have to demonstrate there is real demand with actual job descriptions that have been posted by employers seeking employees for this role. Didn't take us very long to do that research. Budgie found half a dozen just by looking straight at the internet. We found a range of organisations across multiple industries looking for these people. And when we talk about skills shortage in the cyber world, this is the start of it. We can't even fill the basic entry-level roles, let alone build a pipeline through the rest of the industry. So what are the job roles? Well, job titles. So Cyber Security Administrator, Access Control Administrator. Who's doing the maintenance of access control? You've got to have somebody there doing a lot of that. An incident response technician, junior SOC analyst, security analyst, junior threat and risk analyst. These are all things that people could do as an entry-level role and be a very useful, valuable part of an organisation. So what we had to do next was develop a set of duties. What are the job? What is the job they're going to do? And you can see in this is part one. All sorts of areas of the business are covered here. And it's largely derived from the work that was done with the occupational standard in information security, the IISP frameworks. We've drawn widely, but it's quite broad at the beginning, the first two duties. Then we go into cyber help desk, implementing controls, looking after incidents, certificates, access rights, assets, backup and recovery. Hopefully in here you're seeing a flavour of there are lots of elements of cyber and information security covered in this. So that's the first set. And the second set goes a bit deeper into vulnerability assessment, threat intelligence, reviewing processes, policies and standards, compliance, and then some softer skills around collaboration and monitoring, detecting security threats. So the stage we've reached now is part of the statutory process is we have to go out to the industry and say, if you were to employ somebody as an apprentice on this standard, do these duties represent the job you will employ them to do? So these 17 duties don't have to cover all of them, but would you give somebody a job that looked like this? Okay. Straw poll. Does this look of interest? Hands up if you think this has a place. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay. So what we have to do now is ask all of you to provide some input, which will be assessed by initially Qufaro and then presented as the second stage, the final standard approval stage of the apprenticeship development. So we've put in a proposal based on those duties. We managed to do that incredibly fast, according to the Institute. We started November with the employer group. We submitted May, and we had the result end of June, and the proposal's been accepted with minor changes, which you've already seen changes up here. We are submitting the full standard beginning of August, and we'd like consultation, we'd like some feedback. So that's part of what we're doing today, is say, this is ready to go, this is really trying to help sort out some of the entry-level issues in the cyber skills pipeline, but we need some additional advice and guidance. That will be consolidated and then submitted to the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education at the beginning of August. If they like what we've proposed and they're content with the employer consultation results, then the standard should be live hopefully September, October this year, which means we could actually have people being employed, working with training organisations and employers into these roles by the end of the year. So it was quite ambitious to say we could do it within a year. We're well on track. We've got, see, IISP, BCS, we've got a whole range of employers. We've got apprenticeship providers, everyone's on board, just waiting for the employer consultation. So my takeaway from this section is we have a survey to complete, which should take you no more than 10 to 15 minutes, asking you to review the duties and the knowledge and skills statements that support that, and just give us some feedback as to whether this actually represents real jobs in the industry. And the question is, would you give somebody a job like this? Because if you would, and you've seen the business case from Budgie just now, then hopefully you'll see a way to find a role for new people to come into the industry and not have to sort of come in through an IT infrastructure route or coming through. They can actually come straight into cyber. And if we're really going to start addressing some of the cyber security skills gaps, we've got to start at this level. We're leaving it far too late. Fantastic work's been done at university level, some fantastic research, degree apprenticeships, but we've really got to address the vocational world. This is where a large volume of learners are. So our request is to fill in the survey for us, and we've even made it really easy. tinyurl.com/cybertechnician. It closes on the 19th of July. So if you could spend a few minutes over lunch, then please do. If you could do it as soon as you get back home to your office, wherever tomorrow, but the sooner we get the feedback, the better. But equally, Budgie and myself and the Qufaro team will be on our stand over lunch. Please come and talk to us about the standard. I'd like to say it's great to have a number of the Trailblazer employers in the room with us. This has got some quite significant momentum, but if you think we can adjust it or make it more relevant, or we've left something important out, then please let us know.
I would also add that if there are other people that you're aware of that should be involved in the consultation, please feel free to pass it on to them. It's on the BCS website already. I know it's been sent out by Tech UK as well, and ADS. I've asked IACT if they would forward it on as well. I think IISP will also be putting it on.
And I think it's on the, yeah, it's going up on the ISP site. Just put cyber technician into Google, your friendly search engine, and hopefully you will find the cyber technician consultation. And this is hopefully one step to really try and start addressing real issues in the cyber skills shortage that we've got. And I'm not just talking about it with a different hat on. We're already signing up for one of these. We'd like to see as many people as possible sign up, but the best way to do it is just start taking on apprentices in cyber and get people really coming into the industry.
So for clarity, what we're looking for is people to review the duties that we've got up there and provide any comments on those that you may have. Also in the survey are the knowledge, skills and behaviours, which are put in as one big lot rather than breaking them down individually. You may have some comments on those as well if you want to put those in at this stage.
The other thing that would be very helpful is job titles. A key part of the specification of an apprentice is the job titles. Earlier on, these are the ones we've got currently. These are the ones we've found through doing our own research. If you think the job title is different for somebody that would come in out of school, working in a cyber role, and you would give them a different role, it would be really helpful just to know what that job title might be, particularly if it's one that you've advertised. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what we've been doing at Qufaro to try and bring real qualifications in to try and address some of these cyber skills gaps. And if think that you'd like to get involved or help us more, then please do. I think Peter's going to say something.
Kevin, just one thing to add. One of the things that I found when I was working with you was limiting the level to level 3, because it is quite easy to move up the scale into level 4 and level 6. So, when you're completing the feedback, keep in mind the fact that this is a level 3 apprenticeship.
Yeah. So, we've got time for a few questions.
This is great. How do you see the, if you like, the supply side being facilitated? So, having agreed a format for the apprenticeship, how do you then get the applicants suitably screened and sort of in process? So
that's really where the training providers start working with the employers. We have somebody at the back who can talk to this, if you'd like to.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we would work with the employers. We would look at how they recruit the candidates. We'd go through that process with them. We'd ensure there were some assessments, if necessary, to make sure those candidates were the right candidates for that role or for that apprenticeship. And then we would work with you on developing the training that is relevant to those apprenticeships, and also to make sure they were relevant for your business as well.
Does this, or how does this, align with the Foundation Certificate in Cyber Security?
It doesn't, but it does. And do you want to say something on that, Peter?
The Foundation Certificate is no replacement for an apprenticeship. What the Foundation Certificate is basically it covers the basic principles of cybersecurity or information security that can be taught in about a week and can be evaluated through a multiple choice question set. This is a proper apprenticeship which is focused on job roles, on job duties. The training is specific to those job roles and the duties, and there is a much more rigorous endpoint assessment at the end of it.
But it's quite likely that something like the Foundation Certificate, if that is something that you're interested in, can be used as part of the training plan, because it fulfills a lot of what's on the specification.
Okay. Looking at those job titles, specifically the one you've got there of Access Control Administrator, that's very often a role that's not within IT, that's within the business itself.
No.
So you at the moment are only talking to IT-related businesses to send this out, but have you thought about going into some big companies to reply to this, because that's very often not.
Yeah, and we've actually had some of them involved in the Trailblazer group. Budgie.
Yeah, so there are big companies like IBM. So Kevin is co-chair along with Anna Witherington, who's head of early careers at IBM. We've got Capgemini, we've got Fujitsu, we've got Deloitte. So there are some big companies in there as well as a mix of smaller companies as well, including one-man bands.
But we also go a lot wider. So local government, we're going a lot of manufacturing industries particularly have need for these types of roles. But
SAP is a particular one that has a whole host of people sitting in the middle doing access control across the module.
Yeah, and would you like to take a 16 to 18-year-old and bring them into a role like this as a start of their career? Yeah, that's probably a good place to come in. And this is the way to enable it. There haven't been the vehicles to enable that to happen. So that's what we're trying to address is if you have those roles, it's really important in the business, here's a way to actually bring people in to start their career in that sort of function.
Hello. I've been leading and developing the degree apprenticeships.
Yes.
As I've been focusing more from level 4 to level 7. And the major issue we found is that because we have level 3 graduates coming saying we want to do a level 4, but they're missing the academic element big time, and we find it really hard to bridge the gap, and they would either fail, drop out, and I find it even really harder when I've been talking to the employers how to change, shift the culture that okay, we have been doing vocational studies for years, but how do we bridge the gap now? So I was wondering if you...
It's actually where I started here, because I started this journey up here in the master's space, then worked through degree apprenticeships, and then worked backward. And eventually you realise that you've got to start somewhere with a foundation. It might be, if you're going to go down an academic route, the EPQ is a good way of starting, to give you some foundational knowledge before you get to university. If you want to go in the vocational world, then this is level 2. This level 2 is a really good, level 3 is a good place to work. There's actually a gap in the skills pipeline between the new GCSE standard for computing has some cyber in it. Not much, it's quite practical infrastructure based, but there's something. And then you come through the A-level, level 3 vocational, that tier. There's quite a lot of gaps. There's not a lot of good provision in that space. And then we expect people to come into university with a good background knowledge. And it's like, there's a gap. So that's particularly what we're trying to focus on at Qufaro, is to fill that.
I think there is a bit of a challenge here as well, that there is obviously the academic route, which is where we started off with Qufaro with the UCAS points. But what we actually found was that a lot of kids don't want to go down the academic route, and they've got real talent, real skills. I mean, the sort of pen tests I've seen some of these kids doing on this school networks, fortunately with permission, but seeing the quality of the reports and the vulnerabilities they found, these kids are actually very, very good.
I've got to say, I'm lead assessor, and some of the essays that you see submitted by people that are 16, 17, 18 are phenomenal. They've really got it. And this is what we're trying to nurture, is we need to get these people in even earlier than we're doing at the moment and give them a good foundation. So if they want to go on to a level 4, if they want to go to a degree apprenticeship, that foundation is already there.
Just as a follow-on to that last question, I did an apprenticeship years and years ago, which is a combination of the on-the-job skill stuff and the academic stuff as well. I'm not sure I got this. Is there an academic part to that apprenticeship that you're talking about?
There is a training part. There is the off-the-job training that we have. So alongside these duties, you have a set of knowledge, skills and behaviours that you have to develop. Okay. The skills and behaviours you largely learn doing the job. The knowledge you learn through training programmes, and that is off-the-job training, and that has to be specified as part of the standard. So once we've got this agreed, we then have to put alongside it basically a set of learning objectives to be fulfilled through a training provider. So they get that off-the-job training alongside, which is where things like foundation certificate or lots of qualifications, CompTIA have some amazing stuff, lots of things can fill those training requirements so that training goes alongside the apprenticeship.
Yeah, so there's a qualification that comes out of this that we formally recognised.
The apprenticeship is recognised, and you'll get one or more qualifications as you go.
Hi, so my question, you may have begun to answer it, but perhaps only largely on a technical area, because you always see the talent of the 16, 17-year, they're really good at breaking the technical or looking at the technical, whatever. How do you make the decision as to whether these duties are level 3 duties? Some of what you're asking them to do, analyze, support, is very senior. Well, not senior, but I mean, it could be a lot for.
It's experience.
Yeah, it comes from experience. So how did you make this decision? Is it the frameworks? Is there equivalencies in the other digital things that have similar types of?
So we have used the frameworks that are around in the industry as the starting point. These duties, remember, what this person should be able to do at the end of their apprenticeship. So after 2 years' worth of on-the-job training, of experience, this is what you've recruited them to do. So this is the job description template for the end of the apprenticeship. So you employ an apprentice to train them into doing this job. And yeah.
So you have a framework that says 2 years experience would be what they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've submitted, as I said, we've submitted these to the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. They've reviewed it educationally. They've reviewed it on every dimension other than, in fact, they've even gone into a lot of the cyber. They review that it's consistent with all other frameworks, with all other educational programs, and that what we're asking is appropriate for the group we've identified. And apart from 2 minor changes, they came back and said, yes, you're appropriate. For somebody that's completed 2 years in a working environment, in one of these roles, with the appropriate training alongside, you've got it at the right level. So it's been externally assessed that we've pitched it. The descriptors have been pitched at the right level. I think there's a question.
Hi there, Ben Jefferson. I work as a consultant with a number of SMEs, and I can see it would be great to get an apprentice into some of those small businesses. They generally have ISO 27001, and there are various controls around personnel security as part of that. I can see there being some reluctance and some difficulty getting particularly young people without a sort of track record into some of the roles, particularly regarding the duties. And I think this touches on the previous question a little bit. How do you get somebody with, how do you fulfill the compliance requirements around personnel security and background checking and getting somebody doing, you know, administration of access control?
I'll split that into two. The first is, there is a major difference between this and something like the T-levels, where T-levels, somebody's been put into a school for a few, what's it, a month, a couple of months in the T-levels?
Well, T-levels are 2 year, 3 years.
Yeah, but the work-based bit is 3 months. It's quite hard to do that. It's really hard to do that. Apprentice, you're actually employing them. So they are your employee, and you would put them through normal processes. Yes, there's a risk, but they are a standard employee. And actually, a lot of 27001 controls have been thought about as we've designed this, but it's applicable areas of the business. Specifically, Mel, is there anything else that would be done with the employer?
It could vary employer to employer. Obviously, we would have a big consultation period with them to make sure that this is the right apprenticeship for the individual and for that business.
Yeah. So, but I think the two together, the consultation to make sure it is, because it's not going to be right for all organisations. But we've also taken on board, this is a full role. There are roles that you can do. I'll say, is there anything on government? I think, would there be local authorities? Would there be an issue bringing somebody in 16 to 18?
Discussions still needs to be had. I think we're still looking at that, but as well as T-levels as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still up for discussion.
Yeah. And
with SMEs, the problem is you need to really, because they're so small, if you're getting one person in, you need to do quite a lot, quite a broad spectrum of stuff. You can't say we can just do the bits that don't require a clearance.
Yeah, and the discussion with the training provider would be very important to make sure it was a good fit. But if it is, for some businesses, it will be a good fit.
Just want to say one other thing. Remember, this is level 3, and if you look at a lot of the duties, it does say in accordance with relevant procedures and standards. So it's not something where you're going to just say, go away and do this on your own. You're going to tell them what it is that you have to do and how you have to do it.
Yeah. It's in the standard specifically that you have to work within the organisation's framework.
Okay, so there's something to be done with assessing the capacity of the employer themselves, so that they can actually impart, which there's going to, at the small business level, the maturity levels are
which
very
would
low.
come from the discussion with the training provider.
Got it. Okay, and are you writing a framework for what this to guide the training providers?
So the training we write the standard first, and in there is a lot of guidance. The training providers then have to pick that up and put that into practice with the employers they work with.
Okay.
So, and where we've very run out of time, but okay, one
final quick
question.
Well, it was more of an observation rather than a question. So in a lot of smaller organisations, these things are either not being done, but they should be, or they're being done by somebody who's not been appropriately trained and skilled up to do it. So you'll get an infrastructure technician doing a lot of these things who don't have all the context and awareness and other things they need. So this is really plugging a gap and enabling a smaller organisation to move forward with their information security and cyber in a way that they currently can't do.
Thank you. So, very last thing, thank you for sitting in the hot room and listening to me go on about education. It's a niche subject. And please fill in the survey. We really do need as many responses as possible.
And apologies, there's no latest cricket update.
Thanks very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the budget.